4K gaming in 2023 seems to be this feverish dream. Graphics card makers claim each generation does marginally better than the last. Finally, is now the time when 4K gaming is no longer this unreachable beast? Well, depending on the card, no. The RTX 3080 is almost 3 years old, and you would be fair in assuming that this generation of cards would be at its end, and you would be wrong. Now the 3080 is pushing hard to hold its weight now, you can still get amazing FPS without needing to push your graphics down. When paired with the proper CPU, the 3080 does an incredible job holding a steady FPS even in the most demanding titles.
Why do we respond to it differently? How can some people just adapt, while others clearly struggle? My purpose is to help you respond to change.
The RTX 3080 is a relatively cheap card, punching well above its generation, making the RTX 4080s and 4090s look well overpriced. While you do have to buy the 3080 aftermarket, it still goes for a very good price considering the performance. It's actually a good value. The CPU I paired this RTX 3080 with is the Ryzen 7 5800X 3D, an amazing CPU with 8 cores that will give this GPU the room it needs in any game. We also have 48 gigs of 3600 Corsair RAM, a weird number, but great speed. So overall, the performance of the system should be good enough to show the true capability of the RTX 3080. The Ryzen 5800X 3D, while slightly older than the AM5, still performs amazing, and you should have no problem getting a stable FPS as long as you have the GPU to match. You also may need to update your power settings for this chip, as out of the box, you may get a slightly hot chip with some headroom for optimization. Let me know if you guys want a full video on how to do that, but for the ones that know, my offset is currently at a negative 0.05. Temps weren't terrible, hovering around the 80C mark, which is fairly typical of these chips. You can dial your power draw more for some better temps, but these are fun to give a better baseline. The combination of these two is actually a very decent rig. Most games have started really relying on CPU power, and the 3D cache on the 5800X 3D is a great way to stay in generation. Pretty much these processors have 3 times the amount of cache that other CPUs have, which is 96 megabytes, allowing this processor to talk much faster between links within itself. It gives you AM5 performance on the AM4 boards, and depending on the price you get it at, maybe a much better value. Typically these chips go for about $300, and being $100 cheaper than the 7900X and very similar performance, you don't want to scoff at these chips and their value. Even if one generation old, assuming you can get the clock to hold, you can expect a 4.5 boost and the chip will idle at 3.4 GHz. Now the RTX 3080 fits in a very similar spot, still being an amazing value for the price. However, it's much older than the 5800X 3D. The RTX 3080 is pretty much impossible to get new. However, you can find them used on eBay for just over $400, and in some cases the high 300s. These cards still perform amazingly well and will give you great FPS in games. There are multiple versions of the 3080, and I have the Asus TUF 10GB card. The 10GB of VRAM, while being slightly low to days, still runs games great and is able to handle 5K, which is just a step above 4K. The RTX 3080 has no real problem pushing the extra needed pixels for very high settings in almost every game. I played a combination of games and played for around 30 minutes each. Starting with Call of Duty, I maxed out the game and played at 5K with 44 FPS being the average. Temps on this game were the lowest at 85 degrees C on the GPU and 73 degrees on the CPU. Next was Cyberpunk, and this one we did 5K maxed out too with low RTX, and we got around 38 FPS with the GPU actually hitting its limit. Something you want to note is that the RTX 4000 series does almost double the performance of the 3000 series cards. So if you want RTX on, you may want to be looking at the 4000 series. For our temps, we're seeing on the GPU 86 degrees C, and on the CPU we got 75 degrees C. Very close to our Call of Duty temps, but just higher, if only FPS matched too. Next, we played Call of Duty Cold War maxed out and got an average of 60 FPS with 80 degrees C on the CPU and 86 degrees on the GPU. Really starting to heat the system up. The game was noticeably smooth, as well as hardly feeling choppy. Star Citizen was run at 2K for playable FPS, cause at 5K I would get low 20s and it wasn't an enjoyable experience. So 2K maxed out, we seen 30 FPS average, and we got 87 degrees on our GPU with 80 degrees on our CPU, the hottest our system would get. Hitman was better, 5K maxed out with 1.2 super sampling. We would get around 40 FPS, smooth, very playable experience. Temps were 85 degrees C on the GPU and 79 degrees for the CPU. Fairly high, but not cooking. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you enjoyed, you can watch another one on my channel, and if you really enjoyed, then you can leave a like and subscribe. And tell me, what do you think of this system? What do you think of these parts? And do you have a RTX 3080 or RTX 4080? And what system are you running right now? Thank you guys so much, and goodbye.